Kia ora, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. We're just going to give people a minute or so to connect. After school is always a tricky time, so we will be starting at 3:30, but we'll just give time for a few more people to kind of register and find the link and sign themselves in. All right, kia ora koutou, ko Marisa Mackay tōku ingoa. Welcome to our webinar focused on the resource Understanding Movement Progression in the New Zealand Curriculum. It's proudly brought to you by Physical Education New Zealand. Now, this resource was developed and written by Tom Hobbs, Lynn Kilpatrick, Alan Irish, Greg Byrne, and myself, all who bring a deep expertise in movement knowledge in the New Zealand curriculum and in particular in the primary and intermediate sector. Today's session will offer a brief introduction to some of the key sections of this resource, including the motor concepts and movement skills tables that you can find in the resource and what that can look like in context. It'll also provide some clear guidance on teaching movement progression across levels 1 to 4, drawing from the health and physical education achievement objectives, which align with the curriculum expectations for years 1 to 8. You'll leave today with some clarity on what the resource contains and how it can support the teaching and learning of movement progression that's inclusive, developmentally appropriate, and responsive to all ākonga. Thank you again for joining us. This webinar will be recorded and it will be made available alongside the resource on the Physical Education New Zealand website for future reference. So let's get into the resource. First and foremost, who is it for? This resource has been designed to support generalist and specialist teachers of physical education across years 1 to 8 in New Zealand primary and intermediate schools who teach according to the New Zealand curriculum. And what is it about? Well, it was developed in response to the requests for movement skills support by New Zealand primary and intermediate teachers. It aims to provide a guide to teaching movement in alignment with the curriculum through holistic, cultural, and inclusive practices. And furthermore, it's there to provide some clarity around the expectations of movement development for learners across years 1 to 8. For clarity and transparency, this resource has been developed to support learning according to the current 2007 Health and Physical Education curriculum. We are aware of the current curriculum refresh in health and physical education led by the Ministry of Education. No information about this refresh is currently available, nor is there a confirmed release date for that. When that information does become available, this resource may need some modification to align. However, developmentally appropriate movement progressions will still remain.
Kia ora. Thanks, Marisa. Kia ora koutou, ko Lynn Kilpatrick tōku ingoa. I'm going to take you through the frameworks that you're going to find at the start of this resource around fundamental movement knowledge. So these frameworks are a tool that's helpful for us to think about the key elements of movement. They're not new, they're not prescriptive, they're not exhaustive, but they're a starting point to help us to think deeply about how we move and how we learn to move. You'll notice that there's no by age 5, by age 6, by the end of year 1, in terms of the order of skills in this resource, and that's deliberate, because we recognise that every body is different, every body. And that's a key to fundamental inclusive physical education. And the goal is for all of our tamariki to learn how their body moves and to learn the skills that are relevant to them in their contexts. These skills should give every child the confidence, the competence, and the motivation to go on and engage in physical activities that they choose. So these frameworks for kayako help us to notice, to recognize, and to respond to movement. To think, what movement skills are the tamariki developing? What are they practicing? What are they refining in this activity? What movement concepts are they exploring? Then we can start to focus in on what we want our tamariki to understand, to know, and to be able to do. So I think the best thing you can do with these frameworks is take them out with you and watch your tamariki. Play different games, try different activities, and look at the concepts and the skills and pick out everything that you can see taking place in the game. When we do that and we can start to embed and understand this, the more you'll be able to identify the individual learning needs of the tamariki in your class. Be able to watch their individual progression in movement, identify what their next steps are so they can become more proficient in a specific skill, or what movement concepts you could be using to help focus and develop that skill, to challenge it, or to deepen the knowledge and understanding of it. If you want to go to the next one, Marisa. So these movement concepts are underlying principles and ways that we can explain and think about how our body moves. They add richness to the movement skills when we think about them. So, for example, if we looked at relationships with objects and took running as a movement skill, if we are running through the nahiri, so running through the bush, that is really different to running on a sports field, which is different again to running on a court. And so by exploring our movement skills and thinking about the different concepts and the way that we can explore, frame, and introduce these concepts, we can deepen and enrich our understanding of the movement skills, as well as deepening our understanding of different elements that are important to movement. For example, connection to te taio, which is really important for a lot of our Māori learners, and seeing the role that physical activity and the environment play together. If we look, yeah, perfect. With the fundamental movement skills, it's really helpful to think of them as building blocks to help us to become physically literate. So and it's a different combination for everyone as well. These movement skills will look different depending on how our body moves. And there may be skills which are not on here that might be more relevant to a learner as well. But it's thinking about what are the things that I need in order to progress in my confidence, in my competence, and help me to be more motivated to be physically active. It's not just about learning a specific skill for a sports event that's coming up or to make a certain team, but a broad range of skills empowers all tamariki to be able to access and choose different types of physical activity. So how do we do it in practice? Well, tamariki need, jump back one more, Marisa, sorry, need lots and lots of time and practice, time to consolidate, to explore. And so we would recommend dipping in and out of these different skills. Try them in different contexts, mix them up. You might choose to focus on one skill and an activity, but then use a couple of different movement concepts within that activity to deepen that understanding by adding constraints, or you might even use it to make something easier or to highlight one particular element. Another thing that's really important or helpful with these grids is giving tamariki language to talk about their movement and to describe their movement. So that's really, really key in helping them to understand our feedback, but also being able to self and peer assess as well. Next one now. So this is just to highlight how complex the games that we play in PE can be, and how much movement is taking place, how much learning for our tamariki when we work with them. So if we look at a context of ultimate frisbee, you can see there that there are loads of concepts and skills that are being used in the game. We've got a dynamic game, so a game that is fast, we're being responsive, unpredictable in the way that we have to use our locomotor skills. We might be running, we might be jumping, we might be leaping, we might need to sidestep around someone, we might be walking while we're waiting for the frisbee to come to our side of the field. And so underpinning all of that is your balance. That's critical. There's the coordination as we land from jumping to catch the frisbee and then get positioned to be able to throw it. Or as we're running and quickly have to change direction when the frisbee tracks in an unintended direction. Then there's throwing and catching the frisbee, that manipulative using an object, which sounds really simple, but we all know that for a frisbee to fly, it really has to flow, has to be smooth. To do that, we've got to coordinate multiple body parts. And then we've got to think about how hard we have to throw it, or where we want it to go. The pathway, we need to be able to evaluate the space around us. So where is the person I want it to track to, or the space I want it to go to? Where are members of the opposite team? So there's a whole raft of things that are happening for our tamariki when we start to unpack and think really deeply about the skills and the concepts that are being used in any physical activity. I'll hand it to Tom now.
Kia ora, Lynn. Kia ora ko toma hau, kei te kura o whakarongo au. So what we're going to be doing now is taking a little bit of a dive into how the resource unpacks the achievement objectives. Obviously, we've only unpacked the movement skill progression. There's a lot more to the health and PE curriculum. But yeah, we're looking really at those movement objectives. So the purpose is to unpack them in a way that it's both clearer to understand what each level looks like, as well as subtle changes in the language that makes each level more challenging or fruitful, opportunity rich, I guess you'd say. And to just see how they build upon each other. So we're going to go into a look at the level 2 AO here. So we've got practice movement skills and demonstrate the ability to link them in order to perform movement sequences. So a lot of language to unpack there that can potentially help build on that level 1, and also when you're looking at level 3, look at where Aotearoa have come from. So if we look at practice here, so practice, the definition of practice, if you could, there we go. Regularly engaging in physical activities to develop skills, experiencing enjoyment and creativity using physical skills in activity. So that's what comes to mind when you're thinking of practice. Movement skills, as Lynn covered there, we're looking at locomotive, manipulative, looking at stability, alternative movements, adaptive movements, and demonstrate was an interesting one because we found when creating this resource there were it was quite open to what to demonstrate actually meant, and we've sort of made that a bit more concise. So exhibit with growing frequency and consistency and shown by one's actions. The real meaty part of level 2 that isn't as much in level 1 is link them in order to perform movement sequences. And so here it says link them to perform. It's about putting separate actions together in a coordinated and purposeful way to achieve a specific outcome or express an idea. And just unpacking this part especially shows what the step up is into that level 2 area. So identifying specific skills, communicating specific skills, ordering them, performing them in a sequence, applying them for a purpose, sequencing similar skills, and sequencing variety of skills. So that's just one example of how we've broken down each of the AOs just to give a little bit more of an understanding of how that would look like in practice, both in teaching to the AOs and as well as that what it might look like when you're trying to see where your Aotearoa are at. So yeah, obviously, like when we're understanding movement progression, it involves understanding the language that's used and the differences in how they build on each other. And just a reminder that progressing movement, I think Lynn touched on it a little bit before, it relies on a number of factors from attitudes to physical limitations. You know your kids, this is to help identify where they're at, where they've come from and where you can bring them next alongside those meaningful, engaging and inclusive contexts. So this is just to help you unpack what it might look like at each level, so that there's challenge and that there's more opportunity-rich experiences. But also, yeah, just make sure that you don't forget to have those meaningful, engaging and inclusive contexts for your movement learning. Right, and next up. All right, so and next up we have was it you next?
Yeah,
Marissa?
that's
Yeah,
me.
sorry.
Just take myself off mute, which is not very helpful, is it? Kia ora, Lynn. Kia ora, Tom. Thank you again for your time in the development of the resource and sharing some of those key points today. We do want to acknowledge that these are just a couple of the factors that have gone into the development of the resource, but wait, there is more. So along with what you have seen today, including further details on each of those achievement objectives across the levels, this resource also contains essence statements across each level, which provide some of those big picture development ideas at each curriculum level. There are also 2 movement progression examples that contextualize those progressions through the examples of balancing and throwing. And there is also a lesson planning exemplar at level 2 to identify what some of that learning could potentially look like. And there's a number of other pieces of information, practical tips and cultural inclusive practices within the resource as well. So whilst this resource is not developed as one that you necessarily would use to take out with you in terms of your teaching and practice, it is more around development of knowledge and ability of how that you would then apply that in your practice in terms of that movement progression teaching and what that could look like for your students. As we wrap up today, I want to acknowledge again the time and sharing of knowledge for over 18 months of this group of writers in putting the resource together. I want to thank you for your time and engagement this afternoon in the webinar. We really do encourage you to critically reflect along and about your current learning opportunities that you're providing ākonga around movement, and then engage this resource to continue your growth and development of practice. Just a reminder here that this resource is free and it can be found under the resources tab on the Physical Education New Zealand website, where we will also upload this webinar to sit next to it for future reference. For any follow-up or any questions around it, please do connect with us through the website or through the email that you can see on screen there. But ngā mihi nui, thank you very much for your time this afternoon, and we do look forward to connecting with you again in the future. Kia ora.